Hi, David Lee here. Just following up after the Google Hangout that Juana Lawrence and I from ASTD did. And I just wanted to share a few other stories that I wanted to share with you, and we didn't have time. To give you an example of paying attention to everyday life experiences and then discovering the stories that are embedded in those experiences, and then thinking about how you can use those stories. So here's another example. I mentioned in the Google Hangout that I volunteer at an animal shelter, walk with and play the dogs, which I absolutely love. And it's interesting, this week I was first playing with and walking and actually working with a dog named Santana, who's awesome dog, but a bit of a wild child. More specifically, he is a leash chomper. So trying to take him for a walk, he turns around, grabs a leash, and turns into tug of war. So obviously that's going to hinder his adoptability. So even though I'm not like a big dog trainer, I watched a YouTube video on teaching your dog not to chomp on the leash. And so I'm working with him to drop the leash. So I'll say, drop it. And then eventually when he drops it, I'll give him a hot dog slice. And then, and like, oh, good boy, good boy. So lots of positive reinforcement, classical conditioning, the hot dogs, good, yummy hot dog slice, connecting with dropping the leash. So after playing with Santana for a while, I move on to Harper. Santana's a sort of, I don't know what he is. He's a mix. He's this beautiful, fluffy shepherd, golden retriever, something or other mix. Gorgeous dog, happy boy. Now I move on to Harper, I think he's white with black splotches. And I think he's a combo of maybe pit bull and lab. And I noticed Harper when he first was in the outside pens before he became what's called available, which means you can adopt him, which for volunteers, you can't walk a dog until the dog is available. They're deemed safe for the public. And I remember playing with some other dog in an outside pen, throwing a ball back and forth, and Harper looking really, really excited, like he wanted to join the game. And what I discovered when Harper became available was he was like totally obsessed about fetching tennis balls. And also he was an incredible Frisbee catcher. I mean, he would do the catch the Frisbee in midair thing. So after playing with, working with Santana, I went to the pen that Harper was in, and I started throwing the tennis ball to him. And it's interesting. So I throw it, he grabs it, runs back, drops it at my feet. He's waiting. Here we go again. I pick it up, throw it, go back and forth. And it was interesting because whenever he'd bring it to me, I'd be like, "Oh, good boy, Harper. Way to go. Good boy." And then after a while, I'm thinking, why am I doing this? He doesn't need any reinforcement from me. This is intrinsically rewarding for him. He's doing it because he loves it. And I thought, isn't that interesting that I was doing the same response to Harper as I was to Santana? And in the two very different scenarios. For Santana, I was trying to train him to do something that didn't come naturally for him. And with Harper, I was simply engaging him in a game that he loved. And I'm like, that's interesting. What's that like? And Juana mentioned about the info line that I did for ASTD on storytelling techniques and thinking in terms of analogies. And one of the things that's in there, the questions is just asking, what is this like whenever you experience something interesting in life? And I found myself thinking about, this reminds me of this project that I'm involved in with a man named Jim Pepitone, who's absolute brilliant in the world of designing work roles, designing work systems so they maximize the productivity and the innovative capacity for knowledge workers. And so we've been collaborating on this project. And one of our challenges or tasks that we're talking about is what example should we use, because we're working on a webinar in a webinar series on this. What example should we use both to illustrate the concept of the difference in between managing knowledge work versus manual work? What are some of the examples we can use to illustrate? And also, because I'm always thinking in terms of analogies, what would be good analogies that we could use that would illustrate the difference between intrinsic motivation, which plays a dominant role in knowledge work, and extrinsic motivation, which is sort of the dominant managerial approach that still is used, but is based on managing manual work, because a lot of manual work isn't intrinsically motivating. So managers try to find carrots to apply so people want to do the hard, unpleasant manual work. And one of the problems is that same methodology oftentimes is being used to manage knowledge work, and it's a very ineffective way of managing knowledge work. So that's been on my mind as we've been working together about how, what would be some examples. We already came up with a number of real life examples, but I was thinking in terms of analogies, and I'm like, this is a perfect example. This is a perfect analogy for the difference between the approaches of something that you need to apply extrinsic motivation to, i.e. Santana and not biting the leash, versus just putting the individual, in this case Harper, the dog, in the context where they could do what they love. And I don't need to be rewarding it. I just need to create the context where he gets to do what he loves and participate in that, i.e. knowledge work. So that's an example of just paying attention to something that happens in everyday life that makes you think, that's interesting, or I never thought of it that way, or wow, I wouldn't have guessed that. Any type of situation that piques your curiosity, surprises you, amuses you, etc., and then start to examine it in terms of, what's the lesson here, or what is this like? And then think about what training topics, what coaching topics, what keynote speeches maybe you're going to be doing soon, and how might this cool experience or amusing experience or just like interesting experience, how can I connect that to these areas that these key messages or takeaway points in these that I'll be making in these upcoming presentations or training programs. So that's an example of just paying attention to something that piques your curiosity, and then it's something that you can use. And who knows, we might or might not use that particular experience. It depends on all the other ones that we come up with. But there's an example. I'm looking at my notes now. Okay, here's another example. This is an example of an analogy. So one of the other issues that Jim and I have been talking about is this. And I'm sharing these examples also because I want you to be thinking about your own process in designing a program and how to use stories in that design process. So not just isolated points, but also throughout the whole design process. All right. So one of the issues that we've been discussing is this. How do you present the principle or the message that the typical way in knowledge workers are being managed is not effective or is not optimally effective. How do you present that idea in a way that's not offensive to the listener, where they're feeling like, oh, so you're saying that I'm a big dummy? You're saying that what I've been doing is the wrong way? And one of the things, and I don't know if we'll use this yet, we're in the brainstorming aspect of this, but again, I want to share with you as much as possible different aspects of the storytelling, the story generation process, and sort of share with you my thought process. So I was thinking about, okay, what are some of the other experiences that I've had, or things that I've heard other people talk about, where you're challenging the status quo, but you're not blaming the person. You're not saying you're a big dummy because you've been doing it that way. And one of the areas that I found myself thinking about, because I'm really like hardcore into fitness and extreme fitness and nutrition and all that sort of thing, I found myself thinking about two analogies that we might be able to use. So one analogy, and you might relate to this if you're really into fitness, is the big, I'll say push, but paradigm shift. Let's say this big paradigm shift in the fat loss field, in the paradigm shift away from doing that unbelievably boring, like trudging on the treadmill or the stair climber, that slow cardio that takes like 60 to 90 minutes. A shift away from that, which more and more research is showing is really unproductive for a number of reasons, which I won't get into since this is not a fitness video. And instead, high intensity interval training as being a much more powerful and effective, and it takes a lot less time, protocol for burning fat. And so fitness coaches and thought leaders, when they present that, hey, guess what you've been doing doesn't work. In fact, it can have the opposite of what you're trying to do, because long exercise time frames, 60, 90 minutes, can actually boost your cortisol level, which makes you better at storing fat, which sort of defeats the purpose. So the thought leaders and fitness experts, in talking about, hey, dude, what you've been doing is counterproductive, they frame it in the, hey, it's not your fault. You've just been following what is sort of old school but still being practiced methodology. And here's the new stuff that research shows works, and here's what it is. So it's kind of the it's not your fault approach to marketing a new methodology. Another related topic in the fitness industry, or in the health and nutrition industry, is the growing awareness backed up by research showing that the last how many years of low fat diet is the ticket to losing your fat, turns out to be wrong. More and more research showing that you need higher levels of healthy fat. So I'm not talking French fries here. I'm talking like avocado, olive oil, coconut oil even, etc. And lower carb rates shifts your hormone profile so that you become a fat burner and not a fat storer. Whereas the high carb, low fat diet actually turns you into a fat storing machine. So again, I'm not trying to make this into like a nutritional video, but the people who market that protocol, again, they market it as it's not your fault, that you're accumulating belly fat. It's because you've just been following what was believed to be the best approach, but now we're discovering something different. So those two examples in the fitness industry, the high intensity interval training versus slow cardio, and the healthy fat, lower carb versus low fat, high carb, are two examples of, it doesn't mean you're a big dummy that you've been doing this and not getting the results you want. It's simply because you're following something that doesn't work. And so we're here to help you see what does work. So that's another example of just thinking about, so the example with Harper and Santana, the dogs, that's an example of having an experience and then being mindful of, oh, this is cool. And then thinking, what's this like? How might I apply it to something that I'm working on? And the two fitness examples actually is an example of coming from the flip side, thinking about the particular issue. How can we challenge people in like, hey, what you're doing isn't working, but not doing it in a blaming way? And out of that question, I found myself thinking, well, what are other arenas that I'm involved in where I've heard people communicate that message in an interesting way? And so that's where I came up with those two examples, and both were in the last week. So, hot off the press. One of the other things related to how do you generate stories, and I almost mentioned it in the Google Hangout, but I thought it would be too tangential. One of the best times, and actually this relates to the whole fitness thing, one of the best times I found for me is when I'm working out. And if you're really into fitness, you know this from your own experience, that really working out really jazzes up your brain functioning. It boosts your dopamine levels, and it gets your brain working in turbo mode because, the mind-body connection, that if you're really energized and lots of oxygen is pumping through your system, your brain is really oxygenated, and you're really in an enlivened, energetic state, you're much more creative than if you're sort of lethargic or, somber or super mellow. So that's another place. Some of my best stories, best analogies come while I'm working out. And so that's another place that it's really good. I'll have a clipboard while I'm working out. So there, okay? And I'm just looking at my notes. Let me give you one last, for instance, and then we'll wind this up. And it speaks to, where do you find stories? It also speaks to the theme that we talked about in the Google Hangout, that stories are a great way to foster mindfulness in people in general. But we were talking about whether you're working with managers or leaders, where you want them to become more mindful of the impact that they have and the price they pay when the impact is bad, is a negative impact, and become mindful of those moments of truth that, if handled poorly, can have a huge negative impact in terms of employees caring about doing a great job, in terms of employees thinking about going for another job. And so let me give you an example, and then we'll wrap up. A couple of weeks ago, a friend of mine shared a story about, it was funny, she's a great storyteller. She was the same one I mentioned in the Google Hangout, who she never realized what an awesome storyteller she was. But when she would tell me experiences that would happen, I would take notes. And she was like, why are you doing that? It's like, these are awesome teaching stories. And so one of the things that has come out of our friendship is now she realizes the amazing library of stories that she has to draw from, that these aren't just interesting experiences or fun experiences to share with friends. These are powerful teaching stories. So she calls me up and she says, I can't believe it. I today in my meeting with my manager, I found myself, I wasn't even in the room with him. While he's talking, what I'm thinking about how many months that I have before I need to get another job. And I'm like, Say that again. And she said, because I'm thinking, okay, let's see. Okay, our next performance review is in, let's say it's in June. Our next performance review is in June. So I have, and I'm being her now, I'm counting back June, May, April, March. And she's counting back until, today when she's talking with me, her meeting, because she said, I didn't want to have another meeting with him. I'm sorry, another performance review like the last one. It was such a nightmare. It was so demoralizing. And so I won't go into detail because I'm going to actually upload on my website, storiesthatchange.com, which you're probably watching this on the website. I'm going to upload the opening set of stories I gave or I shared at a management or leadership conference I did. I think it was like the following week. And one of the programs I gave at the conference was on managerial moments of truth. And I wanted to start off the program communicating key managerial moments of truth that either were a good moment of truth or they were a bad moment of truth, and the impact that those have. Because my goal was to hopefully grab the attention of the audience because they could relate to these experiences, whether on the employee side or the manager side. So if you watch the video, you'll see and hear the rest of the story. But I'm sharing it here as an example of being mindful of stories in everyday life. And some of those are really interesting stories that your friends and colleagues tell you. So as you pay attention to everyday life, including stories that people tell you that grab your attention, that make you think, whoa, or like, wow, I never thought of it that way, or yikes, have some kind of impact, I encourage you to jot down the notes like we talked about in the Hangout. The 2-column Word, you can do like Access or Evernote or Excel, however you want to do it. I do the 2-column table in Word where the right column, each row has a story. The right column has enough detail so I can recall the details of the story months later. I'm not trying to rely on my memory. And on the left column are key words, so I can search the left column for stories on customer service. I can search for stories on morale or onboarding or employer branding, etc. And then when I have a presentation, I can find those stories. So when she shared with me that story, I don't know if right then or later I found myself thinking, I am going to use that story as one of either the story to start off that presentation on managerial moments of truth, or one of the stories, and that's what I did. So those are stories, those are examples of just paying attention to everyday life and then capturing the story and then using them in some type of presentation, some type of program that's coming up. So hopefully this was helpful, gave you more specifics that you can add to whatever. Again, hopefully that was useful in the Google Hangout. And please post questions here and with the Google Hangout page, because I want this to be useful to you. And I am totally up for, as I mentioned in the Google Hangout, doing a live coaching session where there's a topic, either a topic that you would like some ideas on, like what would be some good stories or analogies, and we can coach live. Or if you've got a story that somebody in the Google Hangout asked a question about, what's the right amount of detail? And as I mentioned in the Google Hangout, that really is more of a coaching question, because it depends on the context, it depends on the story, and I would need to hear the detail that you have, and then react to it. So if you want to do that, we can do a live coaching. You tell your story and I give you feedback and we tweak it together. So there you have it. Hope this is helpful and hope to have you be part of this ongoing conversation on creating stories that change. Thanks so much. Take care.